Welcome back, everyone. For those joining us this morning, this is the SNIA Symposium kickoff session in progress. Welcome back from the break. My name is Mike Loris. I'm the SNIA Executive Director. We are now entering the sessions for updates on the SNIA forum initiatives and committees. We will be kicking it off with the Cloud Storage Technologies Initiative. Alex McDonald, take it away. If you hear a chime, that is your 60 seconds remaining reminder.
The red light. Thank you, Michael. And welcome, everybody. I'd like to talk to you today about the CSTI, the Cloud Storage Technologies Initiative. You can get in contact with me, by the way, on CSTI chair at SNIA.org. It seems to be a fairly standard way of getting in contact is the initiative or forum name chair. It seems to get there. So what do? We are committed to the adoption, growth, and standardization of storage and cloud infrastructures. We took a decision some time ago to extend our remit to encompass data services, orchestration, management, and the promotion of portability, as it says here, of data in multi-cloud environments. Effectively, what we're doing is talking and promoting anything around cloud storage technologies. So where we're not focusing in primarily on cloud storage, I think that's a one war. We don't actually need to fight that one over again. So we've expanded out to talk more about the technologies around cloud storage. Next slide. In 2020 has been a pretty rough year, but I think we did pretty well. We're a small but perfectly formed group. We had 10 webcasts in FY20 with over, well, nearly 4,500 combined views. I mean, we are doing a webcast nearly once a month, and I think that's a pretty big achievement for such a small group. The topics that are coming in with good viewing figures are things around AI, around Kubernetes, and the Internet of Things. You can see our top 3 webcasts were influenced by those topics. And again, the top 3 blogs. So we're taking this idea of storage and really extending it out into the cloud infrastructure. And the presentations that we're providing are not only from the members, but we also rope in industry experts to talk about some of these topics. Next slide. Which brings us to what we're going to be doing for 2021. We're proposing, and we're going to be working with a number of other people on these items, obviously, because we don't have the necessary intelligence or bandwidth all in the group alone. In terms of things like data privacy and data protection, where we're getting help from the Eric Hibbard and his group when it comes to security and data privacy and protection. Cloud analytics, Internet of Things, smart cities. So there's a whole bunch of topics that we're going to be covering. I've recently been in contact with a couple of people to talk about the use of genomics and what that means for cloud storage. And we're going to be doing a presentation on that. And Jim Pfister has been in contact with a guy who's done a startup airline where they are using AI to provide them with interesting insights into what they need to do as a business. So there are some real world use cases here in terms of what we're trying to do to expand out that storage in the cloud message. You can see here that that's quite a list. If we get through all of this, I think we'll have done really well. I don't think we're going to complete the entire list, but if people want to help out, I'm sure we can get a good way through it. Next slide. The group collaborates quite heavily with other groups. So I'm going to add a third bullet point here that's not on the slide, but I'll come to that in a second. So in terms of the cross-group collaboration, we already mentioned that we work with the security technical work group. We support the cloud storage twig. There are, if you like, supported twig as an initiative. We support them. We're talking to the DPPC. We've had speakers from the DPPC. SNIA EMEA, and we're also going to be taking as a goal for next year to talk to the Storage Management Initiative in particular, talk about, let's see if we can get any CDMI and Swordfish collaboration going in terms of cloud infrastructure. In external group collaborations, a few there, but I want to move on to the third category, which is people outside of SNIA. We're going to be using, I suspect, quite a lot of guest speakers. That doesn't mean to say that we have a single speaker from an external organization running an entire session. What it does mean that there might be 2 or 3 SNIA members, and perhaps we have a third or fourth external speaker, somebody who's going to bring real world life experience to the topic that we're talking about. And I see us doing quite a bit more of that this coming year. Next slide. Those are our members. We've been recently joined by FutureWay. Welcome to them. But we're, as I say, small but perfectly formed. We are always looking for more members. And I think because of the breadth of the forum and initiative and the targets we've set ourselves, this is a really worthwhile forum to join. Next slide, might be the last one. Yes, so CSTI participation. We've matured, cloud storage is a given. We're beginning to develop a real strong education program that covers a wide spectrum of topics. And we're not limiting ourselves to topics that are traditionally in the cloud storage purview either. Our audiences are primarily vendors, but also an increasing number of end users. And I think that every SNIA member company can benefit from some of this, because there isn't a topic that we can't or don't discuss. And if you want to contact me to take this further, then you can get me, as it says here, on cstichair@snia.org. Thank you.
Alex, the next update is from our Compute, Memory, and Storage Initiative.
So I've just removed one hat and I'm now putting on another hat. So you've got me boring you for another 5 minutes. My apologies. And next slide. So the CMSI was formed by the change of charter from the Solid State Storage Initiative, the SSSI, into the Compute, Memory and Storage Initiative, the CMSI, which more readily, I think, describes the activities that we were beginning to undertake. And that expanded scope has allowed us to do an awful lot more in terms of supporting other technical work groups. And as we'll see shortly, the CMSI have adopted a number of them over the recent period, including the Computational Storage Initiative, which now is a SIG and a twig. So that was the move last year from solid state storage to CMSI, and I think we've had a pretty good year. Next slide. You can see our mission, there's a lot here. And the reason there's a lot here is this is a large group. There are some 40 odd members of the CMSI, and that means that we're able to do quite a considerable amount of work. And you can see that the Computational Storage Special Interest Group, which is, if you like, the marketing arm of the Computational Storage Twig, have already, in their short existence, produced quite a body of work. The Persistent Memory and NVDIMM SIG, we've had the Persistent Memory Summit that's been running for a number of years now. We've been running persistent memory workshops and hackathons very successfully. There's been a huge amount of work done by the PM side of the CMSI. And the Solid State Drive Twig, SIG rather, Special Interest Group, continues to operate and continues to provide a serious amount of information on form factors and on conformance and et cetera, et cetera. So there's a real positive feel to the group with these, if you like, the 3 legs that we have here, which are computational storage, that's the C bit, persistent memory, that's the M bit, and the solid state drive SIG, which is the S bit. So the CMSI, I think, are successfully playing to their strengths in terms of not only the size of the membership, but also the amount of work that we're undertaking and doing. Next slide. So our work items are considerable, and really I'm not doing justice to them here. I think we've covered them at a fairly high level. So initiative-wide, we're attempting to outreach to other industry events like Pearl, the IMC Summit, the Flash Memory Summit, which we've done successfully for a number of years, the OCP Summit. There's been support of SNIA, SDC events, particularly in India and EMEA, for which I'm particularly grateful. There's a PM and Computational Storage Summit that we're going to expand out to be 2 days in 2021. And, you know, just a huge amount of work by each of the groups. The SIG for computational storage continues to support the TWIG. The persistent memory and NVDIM SIG are going to be updating the NVDIM cookbook. There's a evangelization that we're going to be continuing with the PM boot camps and hackathons. And the solid state drive SIG is going to continue to provide excellent material, and in particular, for an example, talk about NVMe classification. We're going to produce a white paper on that. TCO for cost of storage for SSDs. So there's a lot of work going on in each of those three areas. And I'm appreciative to the SIGs for the amount of work that they do that allows the CMSI to be such a successful and large group. Next slide. The TWIGs supported, we've got 3 TWIGs. The computational storage TWIG, which is the C part, the NVM programming TWIG, which is appearing to go into a sort of wind down mode. We need to discuss further about how we do this correctly and properly. But the NVM programming TWIG is considering reducing the amount of activity that it undertakes. And the S3 TWIG that you heard from Eden earlier, talking about some of the work that he's been doing. The external collaborations that we're doing, CXL Consortium, we're going to do marketing outreach work on an alliance. JEDEC with the NVDIM-P support, automotive SSD standard support, and as is usual, everyone's doing it, talking to NVM Express. We're going to do support and joint marketing and the Tech Alliance activities with them. So quite a bit that we're going to be doing in 2021. Hopefully, we will be able to do some of this face to face, though I'm not promising anything, but it would be nice if we could do so. Next slide. So that's the membership. You can see it's quite extensive. We have 36 companies plus 10 individual members, which gives us 46, in fact. And we've had quite a number of new joiners as well, which is really positive. And I'm pleased to see people joining the CMSI. Next slide. Here's who we are. Being a big group, there's a lot of people. As I say, if you want to talk to any of us, then send an email to the CMSI chair at snia.org, and it will get to myself or Jenny Dietz, who is the co-chair of the group. Next slide. I think that may be it. Yeah, CMSI participation. So what do we expect in terms of our impact? A lot. I think one of the things that's really important about what the group is doing is some of it is maintaining marketing messaging for existing technologies that are relatively well understood, like SSDs. And some of it is pushing forward with some really interesting technologies like computational storage, where we're right at the leading edge and where I think we're providing the industry with a home to undertake some seriously interesting and innovative work. And I think that relevance, both in terms of the historic, still novel to our end users, remember, not everybody is yet moving to all flash infrastructures, but still providing this leading edge with computational storage and persistent memory. I think that's a real big advantage of this group, in that it's historical spread from what was new to what is very new. And I think joining the CMSI, again, I think it's one of these groups where there is something for everybody in here. If you're in the industry, if you're looking for the kind of place where you will find other similarly charged people who are wanting to push the industry forward, this is definitely one of the groups you should be joining. So thank you for that, and have a good day.
Thank you, Alex. Next up, we have the Green Storage Initiative. Wayne providing the update. Wayne Adams, if you're on mute, please unmute.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in the world. Seen a lot of people from all over. I'm going to give you an update on the Green Storage Initiative, and we'll go to the next slide. On the right-hand side, it gives you an understanding of what the Green Twig is working on, which has been the Power Efficiency Measurement Specification, which is this building block. And we've gone to market with a series of programs for industry that we're enabling regulatory bodies and testing groups to be able to build up on top of a single specification that we want to use worldwide with regulatory bodies as a test methodology. The biggest concern is if you have every regulatory body working on defining its own set of thresholds and test methods, from an engineering test and measurement standpoint, your organization is going to get overburdened with a lot of processes to meet regional needs and increase your engineering costs. And so since the inception of the group, we've looked at what is the best way to characterize a system in operation, and within this with this test methodology that the Green Twig has defined. But then how do we roll out the industry to have effect with regulatory bodies, independent test labs, large corporations that want to do their own procurement be above and beyond what the vendor is able to provide in terms of characterizing their system, and be able to have ongoing relationships with the different regulatory bodies to keep them herded all in the same direction. So the Green Storage Initiative put together the SNIA Emerald program to build around this SNIA Emerald specification to be able to touch groups inside of SNIA, such as in-house test engineering groups, as well as stakeholding bodies outside of the group. So when we've been working with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for quite a number of years, since roughly 2007, to have them separate the server specification from the storage specification, because there were two different types of technology that needed to be analyzed and characterized in different lenses. And we built this program for Emerald around this specification to be able to further characterize what we need to do around power supplies that were unique to storage systems, as well as get into other parts of the world outside of what the EPA was looking to do, and try and get better alignment with different regulatory bodies outside of the U.S. that were following in some of the footsteps of the EPA, but had ideas of their own based upon different research groups and different national objectives. And what the Green Storage Initiative has done above and beyond these particular programs around the SNIA Emerald specification, at a point in time when greenwashing was the very common trend from like about 2009 out through about 2014 or so, we put a series of white papers out there of how can you characterize a system before you procure it, how do you measure a system when it's in operation, and what's the best set of software and hardware technologies to select to put together a configuration to meet specific storage needs based on the vertical industry and what you were trying to do for response time, latency, and uptime and resiliency. So we've put all those characteristics together. Over time, as greenwashing has flowed underneath the bridge and water downstream, there's been less focus on a lot of the best practices, and most of the focus has been on making sure that if there's going to be thresholds set for measuring a system to earn a accreditation to be recognized in the procurement cycles, that the test methods that we use are fair and not biased, and that the thresholds are achievable and not penalizing vendors. And so there's been a ton of technical research, measurement, and analysis work that's been done over the last several years to work with regulatory bodies to be reasonable. Sometimes it's wondered like, well, what have you really accomplished since you've been formed since 2008? Well, you've basically had no restriction whatsoever for the last decade to ship your system into any part of the world with arbitrary and unreasonable characteristics being assessed on your system for the purposes of energy efficiency. However, as Don Goddard mentioned earlier today, times are changing and some of the analysis is now turning into thresholds, and we're going to start seeing more of these thresholds being established in different geographies. Next slide. So what type of program items that we wrap around the specification? On the left side, we build complete industry training modules around how do you test, what your expectations are to work with the test tools, how to analyze your results, and working with groups like the EPA, also work on how do you do a test report submission. We maintain a strong relationship with the Green Grid, who's done more policy lobbying in parts of the world, and while the SNIA has maintained itself as the technical expert or the engineering group. So from a policy reach in applying that, we've been working with the Green Grid primarily in the US and then Europe. Once a year we hold an industry stakeholder meeting. It's primarily centered around the EPA, and it includes independent test labs, certifying bodies, and it's open to anyone in the industry that has an interest in understanding what are the procurement methods that are being planned for by the EPA, what are the thresholds, and the rationale behind them. We've done a lot of data analysis on black IO thresholds, and starting in March of 2021, there will be block IO thresholds to be able to earn an Energy Star accreditation here in the United States for your system. We use test tools that come from Oracle, VDBench. We've worked with them as they've gone through some organizational shifts that VDBench as a tool will be available to the industry to be used without any issues of it going away. We've been doing idle system data analysis to work with SNIA Japan on their Top Runner program, and that's going to be ongoing through 2021 to make sure that we're working on configurations that make sense and test methods that measure a system that you don't have to reconfigure just for the Japanese market. And one of the services we do is we provide a shipment unit report back to the EPA for vendors that don't want to submit their data directly to the EPA. So we provide a level of opaqueness to the EPA. What we're focusing in on for 2021 is the rollout with the Energy Star program in the US with data center storage version 2. Continued alliance work with the Green Grid for EU Lot 9, and couple of the other complete life cycle policies that are at the country level, like Blue Angel in Germany and so on. We would like to update some white papers. One that's pretty close to being completed is a complete storage technology and outlook paper that we've used with regulatory bodies that the Green Grid and SNIA authored together, which includes a lot of our data analysis work. We need to continually refine our test methods as storage architectures change, and there's a need to refine the type of test methods and possible thresholds that will go with all flash arrays rather than with arrays that have some flash and a lot of hard disk drive. We'll be holding a stakeholder meeting later in the year with the industry, and on Wednesday morning we do have a pretty inclusive session with the EPA if you're able to join us as well. Continue to work with SNIA Japan to work with the Japanese Ministry and the Japanese Electronics Trade Association on their Top Runner program. It's sort of analogous to what the Energy Star program is here in the United States, where it sets a lot of requirements across a wide range of electrical devices, including computer equipment, and the program in Japan is called Top Runner. And we'll be continually to evolve the SNIA Emerald specification and takes future versions out for ISO submission, so that for those regions of the world that prefer to reference an ISO specification rather than a de jure or de facto type of specification that SNIA would create as a SNIA architecture, that would be in place as well. Next slide, please. This is sort of like the proof in the pudding to say, well, when we create technology specification, what's the adoption rate, what's the uptake rate, what's the usage rate? And in the upper right-hand corner, just goes on to state that here in the United States with the US EPA Energy Star program, there's been a number of companies that have been submitting test reports, and that's been a portfolio of raw data that SNIA and other industry regulatory bodies reference and analyze to do future planning. We expect this list to continually evolve as we move into the latter part of this year, based upon the thresholds being in place. So we expect to see more products being tested, and if the EPA works effectively with the U.S. government on RFPs needing to have Energy Star as a stronger requirement this time, now that there's thresholds, companies will start investing more into testing work. Next slide, please. On the left side, we maintained a lot of alliances, and these evolve as we need them. We work effectively with the SPEC organization for the file system testing suite, Oracle for VD Bench, to a lesser extent the SPC community based upon their formal use of VD Bench. Work with SPEC with the listings and the methodology of how do you attach a power meter to a system and take measurements at the level of granularity. Other tools that support the SPEC SFF tool, such as SFlow. We work with 80 Plus, which does power supply efficiency testing and maintains a listing of those power supplies out there. So as regulatory bodies continually evolve their specifications, they first started off with bronze level, silver level, platinum level, and it will go. The efficiency levels will continually be raised in the storage systems. On the policy front, we work through the Green Grid, who works through Digital Europe, that works with the European Union, as well as some of the European Union country level programs. So we work through SNIA Japan to work with through JEDA and MEDI. Other bodies we work with very closely include the EPA Energy Star program, Top Runner program, EU Lot 9. Those are the ones that are most relevant, referencing the SNIA Emerald specifications. Some other regions of the world watch what these groups are doing, and then they do a Me Too or mirroring, or they lift up a large portion of that work and then cross-reference that as the starting point. So the importance of just the SNIA Emerald specification as the building block for these programs is important. As we take our specifications through this accreditation process, SC39 is the one of the groups that's focused in on power efficiency in the data center, and that includes the infrastructure side of the data center as well as the IT equipment side of the data center. The companion national body under ANSI is ITS 39. On the
60 seconds to wrap up, please.
Okay, let's. The next one's pretty obvious. We do some cross work inside of the organization, and we'll go to the next slide. We have a very small membership. The fees are listed there. All your funds go into engineering services in the areas of contractors for program management, data analysis, and test validation. If you need to reach us, I'm the current chair, Wayne Adams, and David Teal's the program manager, and the person that does all the data analysis is Patrick Stanko. We're all people that used to work for companies that are on the phone that pay membership dues. We're pretty active and pretty astute to make sure that all the right things are getting done with all the members paying up their membership dues. If there's another slide, you can flash it. So thank you. Well, do I got time for it or not?
15 seconds.
Why you should join, your membership dues go to underwriting the engineering work, and that's one of the most important pieces of the work that's going on. As companies put less and less resources into testing and engineering development work, we need to augment that with some professional engineering resources, and that's where the membership dues goes. I'd be happy to work with any of you offline to help build value propositions to go back into your company to understand how your dues would be basically a time slice and a cost slice of what it's going to cost you to do it if you had to do all this work by yourself. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. And the chair contact information was included at the bottom of that page. Up next is an update from Rochelle on Storage Management Initiative.
Thank you, Michael. I'm again Rochelle Olvers and the chair of the SNI Governing Board this time. Next slide. SNI in 2020, well, the SNI has been around for, it's one of our oldest initiatives in the organization, and is the concept of storage management is kind of a cornerstone of the organization. As such, we've kind of been focused on this same mission for a very long time, developing, supporting the verifiable and creating storage management solutions based on industry standards. In 2020, we really focused on a couple of things. One is maintaining SMIS, which earlier Don talked about. We're trying to bring it in for a landing. And so we've been delivering some educational content to help support all of those consumers, vendors that are still based on SMIS. And then really promoting Swordfish, as I talked about earlier, as driving the NVMe. We've got the stable block infrastructure for Swordfish. We've got some implementations coming for that. But as we've been adding the NVMe and NVMe OF, promoting that content, delivering educational material around that, and also helping to develop the programs to support that, doing some marketing and awareness campaigns. And also trying to let everybody know that the Swordfish CTP program is rolling out to support both of those tracks. Next slide. So here we've got a bunch of priorities that help enable a lot of those core things that I just talked about going on through 2021. And I'll go into a lot more detail for all of those that want to hear about this in our SMI annual members meeting on Thursday in New Pacific. But just to give a little highlight, these are really kind of some of our key priorities for this year. Again, helping to accelerate the technical development, what's going on there, but really the adoption portion through driving interoperability, conformance, education, and marketing activities. That's the portion that the initiative is responsible for, pairing with the TWIG and the development of the technical components. We've talked about both SMIS and Swordfish. So one of the other things we're really going to be focusing on this year is for the portions of the market that are still on SMIS, and that it makes sense for this year is really how do we help develop a seamless transition for those standards to Swordfish and other storage management standards. So there's a couple pieces there, one of which is for the elements of where folks are using positioning, NVMe and NVMe MI, NVMe native interfaces. Where do we use that versus Swordfish, and how do those things fit together? So there's multiple elements of seamless transitions from storage management standards that you'll see us working on and providing materials and educating everyone, the positioning of all of these different things, as well as providing, from the old to the new. The next piece is, again, I've mentioned education already a couple of times, but one of the things we'll also be making sure we're doing is enabling everyone on the purpose and value of storage management in general. This is a way to draw people in to the technologies that we're working on. As you haven't heard today, but you'll hear in general SNIA overviews, one of the things that we do is we provide, a whole lot of, what is a SAN? What is and education on various basic technologies. We're going to be providing some of those from the storage management perspective this year, in order to help draw people into SNIA and into the SMI and into storage management, so that we can build them up and bring them into learning about Swordfish and the technologies that we're integrating and promoting. We're also doing a lot of partnering with other organizations to expand storage management standards. You can see all these logos floating around here. We have some new alliances. We have some very old alliances that we are very engaged with, like DMTF, some relatively new ones again in NVM Express, and then some very new ones that we're developing and expanding alliances with, like the Open Fabrics Alliance and SODA. SODA's right now just a new marketing alliance. We're expanding that into a technical alliance. The Open Fabrics Alliance we've had for a while, largely with persistent memory, but we're expanding that into the management space as we've expanded the functionality in Swordfish to cover all of the NVM EOF technologies. Open Fabrics Alliance has even more space that they'd like us to cover there. So that's where a lot of those pieces come in. And the initiative is working with them from a marketing perspective, making sure we're plugged in all of the right conferences, to do promotional materials, to educate people on what we're doing and to provide that exposure. Okay, next. We have a lot of people engaged, and I'm not sure if everyone's really familiar with the structure of this SMI, so let me talk about that a little bit. We actually have 3 different programs and places, what we call the pay-to-plays. So there's the initiative itself, and then we have 2 different sets of programs where folks also engage. We have what we call SM Lab. That's largely an interoperability lab. And PlugFest supporting infrastructure like that. We actually have a physical lab that we put equipment in for folks to work together. That's currently in the Tech Center in Colorado Springs. We also run 2 conformance test programs, the SMIS program and the Swordfish CTP program. You can see from all the logos here who's participating where. We actually have pretty good engagement across the board there, and especially as we're starting to ramp up in the Swordfish CTP program. And if you're interested in hearing more about what's going on there, again, please come to the SMI annual all members meeting. We also have the function of how we drive and execute through the SMI organization, and we do that through the governing board. We have multiple pillars there that we help to drive all these programs, as well as all of the priorities and that we just talked about in the previous slide. So those are largely broken up into marketing activities, conformance development, which drives the technical direction and execution of the conformance test programs, and an education component. Next slide. Our governing board is currently made up of, the 4 of us, the 4 smiling faces you see over here on the left, myself, Chris Leonetti, Barks, and Barry. If you want information on the engagement points for joining our various, right here for you, not going to read that to you. It's all a nice little, especially if some of the text gets a little bit low, but I've already talked about what those programs are. So going ahead, next slide. All right, so engagement points, again, what we look for and where we're trying to really focus on, again, is promoting an acceleration adoption of industry standard storage management standards. This is our standards in conjunction with standards done by other organizations.
Did the light turn on?
And also, again, providing that education on the importance of storage management and storage management standards in general. This is partnering with not just SNIA standards, but standards developed across the industry. As I mentioned, we have very, very strong alliances. So this is DMTF and SNIA and NVM Express, and standards. All the standards, how they work together, are part of it, and promoting and accelerating, adoption of those for the good of the industry. Our market segments are pretty much everyone. So we would encourage, folks to either join the SMI or step up if your company is already a member, engage with our programs to help accelerate the adoption of the storage management standards. For any information, we have, contact us through storagemanagement@snia.org. And with that, Michael, I think I stayed to my 10 minutes.
Indeed, you had 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Rochelle. We now move to our committee updates from the Data Protection and Privacy Committee. Thomas?
Well, thank you, Michael. And I'm Thomas Rivera. Hello, everybody. Also co-chair of the Data Protection and Privacy Committee. So next slide, please, Michael. So a quick overview, our charter is really to, at a high level, do a lot of education, and it has to do with in the area of data protection as well as privacy. And we're getting into a lot of the issues, especially on the privacy side, how legislation is changing the landscape. And as much as we can, providing some insights into some of the future challenges.
Lightning here is the
Sorry, we have someone.
Go into the photo booth again.
Scott, if you can mute yourself, you're not muted there. Sorry about that. In terms of the landscape, as far as I sort of lost my place here. I apologize. Oh, I was talking about the legislation. So, especially on the privacy side, how the legislation is changing the landscape. Where some of the changes are that we're seeing from a privacy perspective, especially in the U.S. We don't have a global or a countrywide privacy regulation per se. So we're seeing a lot of interesting state-mandated privacy legislation, the likes of CCPA. In fact, the IoT privacy law just came out recently, and some others. So, and some of those are listed towards the bottom. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Excuse me. So really, one of the things, especially on the privacy side, is that we're trying to monitor what's going on from a legislation perspective as it relates to privacy globally. So, GDPR has been out for a few years. We've certainly done quite a bit of work on that legislation in terms of educational webcasts. We've had some webcasts that we've done that were panel discussions. In fact, we've had some lawyers join us for some panel discussions to get a legal viewpoint. So some interesting things that we've been able to do over the last few years. From an educational standpoint, we continue to publish reference materials, white papers, and additional documents that you'll see in the next few slides that we'll be working on. We try and collaborate also with some other groups. We have some tight collaboration, for example, with the Security Twig, which is another group within SNIA. You've probably heard from Eric earlier today, the Security Technical Working Group, as well as some others within SNIA, but also outside of SNIA, we're actually working on finalizing a relationship and an alliance agreement with the IAPP as one example. So IAPP is the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And so we'll be able to do some interesting work with them, hopefully, if we get that off the ground once we get the alliance agreement signed. Next slide, please. So in terms of the governing committee within the Data Protection and Privacy Committee today, we have those listed here. As you'll notice, we have one board member. He's actually co-chair, that's PK. And then we have a whole bunch of other very active participants that are listed here. In fact, we even, one of our active participants that joins our weekly call is Stephen O'Neill. He's an attorney that recently joined us. So we get to have some fun with him and really get a a legal perspective on some of the work that we do. Next slide, please. So from a participation standpoint, some of the things that we're looking at doing and we continue to do is continuing to look at international standards and have come out with some statements on respective standards that come out and how they relate to data protection and privacy, especially as it relates to some of the work that we're doing. We also have some standards that are being currently revised. In fact, the one on the second major bullet down talks about the storage security standard, which is an ISO document referred to as the 27040. We've done quite a bit of work with the editor of that document, but also there's been a lot of work in the security twig, and it just so happens the chair of that twig is also the editor of the ISO document. So done quite a bit of work in terms of assistance with a lot of the revisions in that document, along with some others that have been modified recently. The TLS spec comes to mind, for example. And then we do some additional work with some other standards bodies as well, including IEEE. And we're looking at potentially doing some work in the Zero Trust Working Group area under IEEE and maybe doing some collaboration there. And then we're going to have a Birds of a Feather session tomorrow at 2 o'clock Pacific. So feel free to join us then. We'll talk about why data privacy matters and hopefully get some interest for others to join our group. Next slide, please. Great. Looks like I made it well under the 10 minutes. So back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Thomas. Great update. Look forward to the BOF tomorrow.
Thanks, Michael.
Now I have an update from on our networking storage forum. John Kim, take it away.
Hello. Thank you, Michael. Just want to verify, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
All right. Thank you. So I'm chair of this is John Kim from NVIDIA. I'm chair of the Networking Storage Forum, or NSF. Next slide, please. So let's talk about who we are, our 2020 accomplishments, and our 2021 plans, and our initiative. Well, I guess and our what we'd like to get done in 2021. So first, what we do, we drive the broad adoption and awareness of storage networking solutions, and that includes different types of storage, different protocols, and types of storage meaning block, file, object, as well as things like hyperconverged storage. We also get into topics like storage virtualization, storage security, NVMe over fabrics, and storage standards, though clearly since we don't have a TWG, a technical working group, we don't make any storage standards, but we often try to leverage or do leverage work from other groups within SNIA like SMI or like CMSI, CSTI, and so forth. We mostly accomplish this by delivering webcasts. We publish white papers, articles in trade journals and blogs, and leverage social media to promote these activities. The two largest or most prolific activities from us are the webcasts and the blogs. Next slide. So in 2020, we had the most success with our webcasts. We produced more webcasts probably than any other SNIA group, with 16 of them in 2020. So a little more than one webcast per month, more than 16,000 total views of these webcasts. The top three were one, Quick, as a new standard will replace TCP/IP. The second most popular was object storage, what, how, and why. And the third most popular was Ethernet attached SSDs. Typo there, should be SSDs, not STDs, my bad. Brilliant idea or storage silliness. And so you can see actually the second and third one draw specifically on work from other SNIA groups. And we're not ashamed or afraid to do that. We're happy to invite participation of other SNIA groups and members from other groups, whether they're members of both NSF and other groups like cloud storage or formerly SSSI, CMSI, and or whether they are, even if they're not members of NSF, sometimes we invite them as guests. We also had a series of webinars on networking, on storage networking security. So this is a 7 webcast series. We covered key management, privacy regulations, encryption, and other factors. So that's proven quite popular. We produced more than 30 blogs. The vast majority of them are related to the webcasts, and the ones with the Q&A where we answer questions from the webcast have proven to be very popular. And we're actually looking at consolidating some of the most popular questions into perhaps a super blog or an FAQ as a way to leverage that. Next slide. So for 2021, what we're looking forward to is, of course, continuing our webcasts. We would like to do an NVMe over Fabrics performance webcast series. We've already done one webcast about it, and we are working on additional ones, as well as a white paper related to that. And we want to look at the different aspects of what can affect NVMe over Fabrics performance. We're also planning a webcast series on storage for applications. So this will probably be, we're looking at perhaps 2 or 3 webcast different episodes in this series that will cover the storage specifics for different types of applications, such as databases or artificial intelligence or other applications that we're going to, that might need different specific types of storage or storage architectures. We're also working on a series called Technologies Ripe for Refresh. So talking about which technologies either are being replaced or should be replaced or may soon be ready for replacement or refresh or upgrade to a newer standard or a newer technology. And we're working on a storage networking packet walk, which will be a more advanced or more technical series of webinars that will talk about specifically what happens with different. Could you try again? Sorry about that. We'll talk about specifically what happens with different storage protocols or different types of storage networking, and how, for example, the connections are set up differently if you compare perhaps iSCSI to NVMe over Fabrics to NFS to SMB, as an example. We're also planning to continue the storage networking security series of webcasts that have proven popular, and we have more security topics coming, and looking at a series on cloud to edge, the impact of computational storage. Impact on computational storage and how it may be used in different places. All right, next slide, please. Some of the other things we're looking at working on for 2021 are improving or increasing our collaboration with other SNIA groups and with external groups. So within SNIA, we definitely would like to do more work with a security technical work group. I saw them presenting earlier today, since we have a whole series on security. We have right now, we've been using members of NSF who might also have security expertise, and inviting guest members or guest speakers from other SNIA members who are not in NSF but do have security expertise. And we would like to work more closely with the STWG in that area. We also want to work more closely with SMI, and then of course with CSTI for cloud storage and things like object storage, and topics related to hyperscalers, as well as CMSI. And we've done a lot of topics in the past and expect to continue doing topics on areas, or continue doing webcasts on topics related to both CSTI and CMSI. On external groups, we are hoping to do and looking forward to more collaboration with organizations like the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the Open Fabrics Alliance. We actually specifically have had a presentation from some people who represent the OFA, and also with NVM Express, the NVMe folks. We have done some work with them before, or we've leveraged some of their materials before, or built out webinars that expand upon some of their topics they've talked about, and we'd like to do more with them going forward. Okay, next slide. Our current members. All right, so you can see here that we have our members. We are just perhaps have one member that we're still working on, who's not listed here, working on possible renewal, and we are actively looking to recruit additional members in the areas of server vendors, SSD or hard drive vendors, and networking and security vendors. If we can add them, that would be great. But this is our current members. We have a pretty active group and pretty good participation on a weekly basis. Next slide. And we also have a few individual members that are not, I think we have maybe 2 individual members not listed here. Next slide. I think I have 2 minutes. So last slide, the impact of the Networking Storage Forum. So our expected industry impact is mostly around education. So we think we're doing a great job, and the popularity of our webcasts and webcast related blogs shows this. A great job in educating vendors and customers. So our audience is both vendors and customers. We've seen that consistently. And also we're promoting the SNIA brand as a place to get a quality education on technology, especially related to storage networking, and similar topics. Our industry segment relevance is currently to vendors of systems, including servers and storage systems, hard drives, solid state drives, and networking equipment. We believe we're relevant to all verticals and industries, because storage and storage networking is a horizontal solution. And in terms of why people would want to join, so it's an excellent opportunity to learn, monitor, contribute, and contribute to basically the education of the community, of our audience, and both SNIA members and non-SNIA members. I should have mentioned our audience includes a large number of both of companies who are both SNIA members and non-members, and a chance to build the company brand and personal brand by participating. So even though we focus on making our webcasts vendor neutral, and we generally do not promote any specific company or product in our webcasts, it's still a great way to get exposure for the different presenters and companies that present in our webcasts. And we've seen that, I think that's worked out very well over the years for the different members of NSF. If you're interested, for more information, you'll contact either Alex McDonald or myself. So you can email me at NSF chair, not NFS is the storage protocol, nsfchair@snia.org. Alex, of course, being so famous and chairing other groups, it's also easy to find him. And we will have a special, a virtual face-to-face this Thursday for those interested who want to join. All right, next slide. That's my 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Michael.
And thank you for the update. I will now move to our last update from our groups before moving to the chair and TC update and our awards, but an update from our regional groups. SNIA has significant activities that at the global scale, and those global activities lead to also local organization of companies that drive activities in the regions. Towards that effect, wanted to give Paul Talbot the opportunity to provide you an update on those activities.
Thank you, Michael. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Talbot. I am the Regional Affiliate Program Director. My responsibility is to support and oversight of all our regional groups, so activities that take place in those regions outside the US, as well as all of the events and promotional activities that take place outside of the US. I'm speaking to you from my home office in Sydney, Australia. You'll be pleased to know the sun is rising and tomorrow exists. So hopefully you're assured by that. Next slide, please, Michael. So yeah, SNIA has global representation, and it varies from region to region. You could probably think of a regional group being structured and incorporated as a business in regions such as Japan, where we have a very strong board of directors, and equally in India and EMEA. Those are the 3 strongest regions that we have representing SNIA. However, we recognize also that there are other types of groups, such as committees and communities that exist, particularly in areas like Malaysia and Brazil, where we have 1 or 2 individuals who remain strong champions for everything that SNIA does and act as an outlet for our content and education in those areas. The challenge, I guess, as for everyone, is that the pandemic has affected all of us. The regions remain focused, but they're having to adapt to the new virtual way of doing things. And that's particularly relevant to our storage developer conferences. I think most of you will be aware that there is an SDC that takes place in India and EMEA as well in Tel Aviv. And so for the first time, we had to adapt the SDC India event to a virtual event, which took place early in December last year. Highly successful, but again, a huge challenge for local resources to step up and provide the first virtual event outside the US. So I guess from a marketing standpoint, we're also aware that our marketing outreach, touch points with 50,000 people in the storage industry, there's a large percentage of those audience resides outside the US. So we should always be aware that our marketing activity is global. Next slide, please, Mike. So work items for this year. We're already starting to look at our international event landscape and what local meetings we can plan. SDC EMEA is already underway for planning. We fully expect that to be virtual. We don't believe there's any way we can organize a face-to-face event. And so naturally, this will become a much more international event rather than being focused on the Israeli community. We will obviously support the Israelis. Once again, it's an important storage community that we represent. But I think EMEA will be much broader in its content this year. And we hope to announce some dates very soon for that event, which will be virtual. And we plan to repeat SDC India again this year. It is still unknown whether that will be virtual or face-to-face, but we're keeping a close watch on that situation. And I think also the fact that we can now use the platforms that we've developed to hold virtual meetings. We want to extend the meetup concept. This has been pioneered by SNIA India and has been highly successful in delivering local meetups with local representation and high quality content provided by SNIA as an educational source. So that concept will be extended. We want to do more of those in more regions. Next slide, please. So the impact that we can have as regional groups really is a representation of the organization and acknowledgement of the fact that all the challenges and technology that we deal with on a daily basis is a global issue. So we have global standards, we have global education. And so the organization looks globally in the way that it goes about its coverage. And so we want to make sure that when we do that, we can deliver consistency. That's key, because we want to make sure that all the content is not only vendor neutral, but is consistent when it's delivered, and make sure that the messaging is consistent throughout as well. And so that requires coordination through the various SNIA marketing activities and educational activities into those regions and the boards of directors and champions that represent those regions and disperse that content. All of the regions need more resources, that's true, but we also need access to more content. So I call upon all of the forums and initiatives and representatives in SNIA to think more globally and think about how you can access the regional groups in order to get your content out to a broader audience. Volunteer participation is the single biggest challenge. It has been so for quite a number of years. And so again, I call upon you to look at your colleagues. If you have representation in the areas that I've just spoken about, we would welcome you to join one of the SNIA regional groups and help us out. The contact details are there. You can contact me directly, but we would love to see you join any of our groups, EMEA, India, Japan, or others. So please consider that.
Well, thank you, Paul, for the international update, and thank you to all the forum, initiative, and committee chairs for the great summaries of their activities and plans for this year. I just have to take a breath at this point because for the last 2.5 hours, we've really been doing a marathon sprint relay of SNIA. And I hope you're equally impressed as I am and energized about all the great work that SNIA is doing and the impact that we have on the industry. This is the place that brings all the different disciplines of storage and addresses holistically the challenges that we face as a storage industry for the years ahead of us. Again, a huge thank you for your participation in today's meeting, as well as to the chairs who presented this morning.